we thought it wise to engage our neighboring country, Somalia, so that we can be able to attend to the issues of insecurity which is affecting our common boundary.
In the relations between countries, when senior citizens begin to behave in a certain way, it is called treason.
We met with His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, our president, and he challenged us as well, saying, go back to your people, go and knock every door, and please help in bolstering security.
Our government relocates the people who are illegally in our border, armed soldiers, which are numbering 100 plus.
Half of Mandara town has now been deserted.
This is where the real conversation happens.
All right, gentlemen, welcome to the show tonight. Rashid Abdi, I failed to mention all your name, but you know him from Crisis. He's a commentator, and obviously he's an expert in the Horn of Africa, and he's joining us tonight, Professor, well spoken on this, and Abdi Kadir, who used to be the advisor to the president on constitutional matters, right? So gentlemen, you're right at the center of this, and it's important that Kenyans know tonight what's happening. And I'll begin by asking you each, how would you summarize what's happening in the north? Let me begin with you, Rashid.
Can you repeat that question again?
How would you summarize what is happening in the northeastern part of the country?
A number of things have combined together, I think. But first of all, the biggest, I think, headache which we people from northern Kenya face is actually insecurity.
Okay.
And the security problem has been deteriorating dramatically, at least in the last 2 years.
Okay.
We can effectively say that there is low-grade insurgency which is actually gaining ground, and that is quite significant. Al-Shabaab isn't just simply attacking, placing a bomb here and there. They are conducting, guerrilla warfare.
Okay.
And we see that pattern. Their IEDs are much bigger. They actually disrupt convoys. They target security. There was a data, some data collected by an agency which tracks the number of incidents in northern Kenya, and 80% of all casualties were actually security forces. And that clearly signals to me this is no longer just a terror threat.
Okay.
It is actually an insurgency which is brewing. Their language and discourse is about liberating a colonized land.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the summary. Prof, how would you summarize what's happening in northeastern part of the country?
Well, it's not new. It's part of the larger problem of the Horn of Africa, and this has been there for a long time. I think the difference is the shift in terms of how Mogadishu respond to this particular problem. If you go to the 1960s, there was insurgency in northern Kenya, but who was funding it? That's a big question. When you have a federal regime in Mogadishu, you have federal relations in northern Kenya. When you have a hostile regime in Mogadishu, you have what my colleague is defining as a low intensity, insurgency. And this is something that has been there from the shifter wars to date. But what has happened in the past, particularly from 2004, when Kenya took the front seat in terms of looking for peace in Somalia, and basically forming the government here, and the government going to Baidoa, then getting the government Mogadishu, and all that, there was more of a federal relations, and the enemy was Ethiopia. Now, with coming of Abiy and this so-called Cushitic alliance, now in mentality in Mogadishu, then the shift is now coming to Kenya, which is now, and not Kenya, the northern Kenya, but Kenya, Nairobi.
Okay.
And that in itself is now beginning to find resonance in the kind of chaos you are
that
having.
we see we're experiencing. You've said something interesting before I go to Abdikadir. I'd like to ask, why would you say when there's a friendly government, the other side there is perhaps viewed an unfriendly government? Why is that exchange of friendliness? Why is it that we can't get both governments friendly at any one point?
It depends on what kind of issues you want to politicians always use certain factors opportunistically.
Okay.
And in playing those cards, now, for example, we may be able to discuss this, but the issue now in Somalia is election 2020-2021, and whether Farmajo is going back to power.
Okay.
And because of that, he plays what we call wagging the dog, where the tail is moving the dog rather than the dog moving the tail.
Okay.
It's a common language in American politics, where you displace issues from internal to international, and the best way of doing that is basically faking a war, even where it doesn't exist.
Okay.
And that's what we are seeing.
This is a technocrat who got into the Somalian politics, and he was hailed as someone who will bring a difference. But I'll get into that. Let me speak to Abdikadir. Your summary of what you have observed.
Thank you. But before that, I think I need to correct a fallacy Professor said. Al-Shabaab is not a friend to the federal government of Somalia. In fact, the biggest threat the government in Somalia is facing is Al-Shabaab. They kill more members of the federal government of Somalia, whether parliamentarians or ministers, than anybody else.
Okay.
Al-Shabaab's activities in northern Kenya are not funded or are not because of the non-friendly nature between Kenya and Somalia. Part of the problem where that's created between Kenya and Somalia is that fallacy. There are people peddling falsehoods that
the government of Somalia.
That is not true.
Okay.
Number two, the problems of the education sector in northern Kenya is based on lack of security. Security primarily is not the function of the populace. You said that the public must provide security if they want teachers. Not correct. The primary responsibility for the provision of security lies with government. In fact, the reason, the ethic of having a state, if the state cannot provide security, it has no business being a state. So the provision of security is the primary function of the government of Kenya. Now, what happened in Mandara, if you ask me what the dynamic is right now, what happened in Mandara is fairly straightforward. There was a fugitive minister of the regional government of Jubaland who was locked up in Mogadishu. He took off, came to Bulahawa. That's where he comes from. The regional government of Jubaland runs from Kismayu in the south all the way to north of Bulahawa. So he decided to come there. The federal government that had him locked up sent forces to capture him.
Okay.
He moved out, and with the help of the Kenya government, settled within our border with the contingent of his militia. There is not sanctioning of having militia in the country. That requires parliamentary approval. That requires a decision of the National Security Council. It is illegal to have foreign forces in this country without going through the right processes. Now, as you would expect when you have people who are looking for this fellow and him with a militia, there's going to be a conflict. The leadership of the region and the elected leaders of Mandara shouted over the rooftops that this is a power cake and it's going to erupt. That's what happened yesterday. These fellows, whether they started it or they were attacked, there was a firefight. First on the Somali side, and then came over to the Kenyan side. There are 12 Kenyans nursing bullet wounds right now.
After the Mandara conflict?
After the Mandara conflict in the Mandara hospital. There were deaths, fortunately not our citizens on the other side. I am not aware of the deaths in terms of the soldiers, but in terms of the combatants, there are a number of deaths. There's property burnt. So I think the primary issue here is the government of Kenya has a responsibility to provide security and to secure the teachers and the residents of that region.
Yes. Actually, what I said is this. I said that instead of the members of parliament shouting at the top of their voices about what's happening, they should rally the powers. They should use their powers to push the Interior Ministry to secure the schools. That's what I said. I'd like to talk about Abdul Rashid Janan, who you're mentioning, the Interior Ministry, the minister who escaped and with the aid of Kenya settled. And it's not the first time. Kenya has been accused of harboring Felician Kabuga. You remember that from the conflict. Now we are told that we are harboring the former chief of staff for Sudan in the country. All that, so I'll talk about that shortly. But let's talk about the visit to Somalia, because it's very important. What was the mission of these members of parliament, and where is there so much uproar over that visit? I know parliament has spoken about it, but still the Ministry of Foreign Affairs wants an explanation to this. So we know parliament has said whatever it has said, it's a non-issue. But let's go back to that, because I'd like to talk about the extent of aggression that we might witness as a result of this minister coming this side. But first, let's talk about Somalia, and I'll begin with you, Rashid, again. What is the mission of these members of parliament? Would you be aware? Apart from what they are telling us, obviously, yes.
Well, I think, first of all, we need to step back a little and say that, first of all, Somalia and Kenya are probably the two most, the closest, countries in the Horn of Africa. And Kenya, Kenya has actually become the second capital for Somalia. At any one time, you have probably 60% of Somalia's elite transiting through this country. So there is such close symbiotic relationship, which has been forged over the years. So there are visits all the time. I think what made this visit unfortunate was probably the timing. It came against the backdrop of growing tensions between the two countries. It was a large number, a large delegation. And then it involved, I think, senior leadership in Somalia. Probably also, it may not have been sanctioned by the state, or I don't know, I will leave to Abdulkadir to explain, I think, the inner workings of what went on. But I think just...
But we don't even need to look far into sanctioning of, by the state, because if this is a private visit, apart from the claim that they were treated as state guests, right? We don't even need to look far to know that you can visit any country at one time, so long as you're not representing the government.
Yes. I think just listening to some of the statements which some of the MPs have made, clearly this was a delegation. It was large scale, and it was semi-official, and they did meet officials on the other side. Now, what was discussed is probably much more interesting than why they visited. Clearly, what appears to be the case is that these leaders are concerned, first of all, about the tensions in Gedo. They are also concerned about tensions in Juba, and wanted to at least find out where the Somali, where Somalia officially is headed. So I don't want to criminalize this visit. And I think the Kenyan government ought to be much more relaxed about this kind of diplomacy. It is what, if you look at states in conflict, generally these are actually more effective than center-to-center dialogue. It's actually those peripheries that can negotiate settlements.
But members of parliament visiting a foreign country without the president knowing, what they say, Prof, is that the president on the 24th of February told them to find a homegrown solution. And they looked among themselves and they said, why don't we begin from here? Why don't we send a delegation to Somalia? But now the question is, if that was sanctioned, and in a way it was sanctioned by the president, or they were sent, albeit not formally, why would it then bring an issue when they land back to Kenya?
I think we need, at the beginning, as we get deeper into the debate, we need to set the terms of discussion by laying out the context as it is.
Of the visit?
Not only the visit, but most of these developments that we are beginning to see and which we are likely to see. When my colleague Abdulkadir was answering the question, he lapped so many issues at the one, the attack in Mandara, the school issues, the visit. It's good we disentangle these issues and deal with them in a way that your listeners and your watching audience can understand this
so limit the scope for us, Prof. Should we touch education, or should we touch the conflict and leave Mandara? We just
even if everybody knows education is a non-issue here, because it's a local Kenyan issue where squarely everybody agrees. There's no disagreement about this, that Kenya need to put its act together in terms of securing its northern part. Providing security, as Abdulkadir put it, is not a gift. It's your right as a Kenyan to be secured. It's also your right to have education. and it's your right to have quality education with quality teachers. And if you're posting, teachers to Hispania, the border with Tanzania, you must be able to post the teachers in northern Kenya. How you do it is your own business as a state. But we have an insurgency here, which is Al-Shabaab. And we have a population in northern Kenya that also has a responsibility, because security is a shared responsibility between the local community and the state. So we also need to see movement, positive movement within the population to deal with Al-Shabaab. Now that I think is an issue. I would personally be more concerned about the relationship between Kenya and Somalia.
Okay.
And in this particular regard, the timelines are very clear that to this issue. First, from the day Farmajo was elected into, or President Farmajo was elected to the office, Kenya was very positive about it. Actually,
and this was his first stop,
and the President Kenyatta, not only his first stop, President Kenyatta went to his inauguration, and he was not given. He was extremely well received. Yeah. He was to go and come back. Pressure was prevailed upon him. He stayed on. And that didn't go down well with the Ethiopians, because they were the favored, but this is it. As he said, Kenya and Somalia are so deeply integrated. I don't know, you're going to need to be corrected here. I don't know any senior Somali official who has no house or family in Kenya,
the country,
and whose children are not going to school in Kenya. And I say any.
The ones
from the top.
The ones you know, all of them
yes,
are here, live here.
Yeah.
The ones you know.
Yeah, yes. And I'm not speaking a Kareman. I've been advisor to President Kagwanja, I can say this on air, since June 2018. So I go in and out of Mogadishu. So we know each other, and these are friendly governments. I'm saying this because we are friendly governments. So what we are seeing is just something that is for a purpose. Now, since that time, we've had issues. The issue of maritime was not a Farmajo issue. It has been there a long time. So it only escalated this time. And the main issue is an ideological division within Mogadishu between those who are for a strong central government, the centralizing logic, and those who are for the federal, stronger federal units. And this has been reported to the United Nations Security Council every month, that the representative of the international community got to address the United States. They say the main problem is the relationship between the federal government and the state government. Now, previously, it was an issue that would be discussed between these leaders and somehow resolved. But when it came to Farmajo, he became very strong in terms of asserting the authority of Vira Somalia in other areas. And then moved a step further to transform that into a political agenda, that all the leaders of the regions must be loyal to the center. And how do you ensure that? Through elections. Okay. And therefore, elections have been chaotic. From the southwest, we have one Robo is in jail, is in prison now. In Garmadug, the same. In Puntland is the same. So when it came to Jubaland, the story was a little bit different, because what would happen in southwest did not happen, and Kenya was blamed for it. Yes. Because it protected Madobe. That is true. The Ethiopian forces, supra-military forces, had gone in with a heavy plane, heavily armed, to abduct him. Then they had done with Robo, but Madobe could not be taken, and the election went on. Now, what we are seeing is the post-election conflict between Mogadishu and Jubaland, and Kenya being blamed for
interfering with internal political matters. That's what you should say.
That's what they are saying. Yes. But the truth of the matter is, Kenya has an interest, because without Jubaland, we have no buffer zone. And that is now no longer a secret that Kenya needs a buffer zone from this insurgent. Okay. Whether it's the right idea or not the right idea, the Kenyan security logic requires that there is a peaceful neighbor.